You are listening to The Audit presented by IT Audit Labs. My name is Joshua Schmidt, your co-host and producer. Today we're joined by Nick Mellum, Eric Brown, and our information security architect, Bill Harris at IT Audit Labs. Thanks for joining us today, Bill. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Can you just give us a slight background on you? I don't think we've ever really learned about Bill. I want to hear just a little bit about how you got to be an information security architect.
He also has another title too, though,
I think I'm about to get one right now. What is it?
I think it's Badass Mofo.
That's it. That's the one I just got. I got into information technology a few decades ago, and really getting closer and closer to security. And it's such an evolving field. I decided to pick up my CISSP in 2018, and have really just been enjoying the ride and all of the innovations that are happening in the space. So I keep coming back to the security area.
How did you meet Eric?
I've known Eric since we were back in college.
Oh.
So we've both grown our careers together.
Since the Umbro Shorts days.
Damn, I was waiting to say it. You got me.
So today we're talking about quantum. Bill, what have you got for us? I know we did a session on quantum, I think last year, or maybe it was a year and a half ago, but there's been some developments. So I'd love to hear about that today and what you found recently.
Yeah, you bet. So last time we talked about the theories behind quantum, and then I want to bring it forward the last couple of years or so, where quantum has seen some progress, but is it really quite there yet, right? And what are the use cases today for quantum? Where's it going to go tomorrow, and how has it evolved? What advancements have really been done in the quantum space over those last couple of years? I want to talk a little bit about that and really what 2025 is looking like for quantum.
That's great. We could use some explanations around quantum. Still confusing to me. I don't know about Eric and Nick, but yeah.
Confused as ever.
Well, if you weren't confused, you're not listening hard enough, so that's okay. Because if you're confused, and that's you're really listening to kind of how things are supposed to work. So just a real quick refresher on kind of how this whole thing works, right? So quantum really works on the idea of coherence, and you can have, in quantum computing, your bit can be a 0 and a 1 at the same time until you observe it, and then it decoheres into either a 0 or a 1. And the way quantum computing works is that you're really trying to keep it in that quantum state for as long as possible so that you can get an accurate reading on it. And what we'll talk about here today is the different things that people are doing to get a more accurate qubit so they can get better readings on it and really drive those error rates down, because error rates are what's killing the potential of quantum computing. So much time is spent trying to correct those errors, right?
Well, hold on, Bill. We're 30 seconds in, right? And this is already gone.
All right, what you got?
We have a 1 and a 0, then it turns into whatever it wants.
So, Nick, a buddy of mine once had a phrase that said, I can explain it to you, but I can't understand it for you.
I'd agree.
And I feel Bill is doing that to us right now.
We'll see what he has to say. I'm sure we'll understand exactly what's going on when Bill's finished with us today. Hopefully.
Well, it's not going to be a rehash of the last session, which is when I did a much deeper dive into quantum, because I don't want to just rehash the same material, right? It's going to be a little bit different angle.
Just to round out this part of the conversation, Bill, is it kind of like the double slit experiment where, if you're shooting a particle, is it through a double slit? It depending on who's observing it or when it's observed, it's either a particle or a wave.
That is exactly it. So as soon as you observe that particle, you are changing it just by the act of observing it. So it's very odd stuff. There is not a really thorough understanding of how it works, especially when you get into some of the subparticles that drive quantum. So there's a lot here that I don't understand, because there's a lot here that physicists don't understand as well.
Cutting edge stuff. Cool.
So today, the fastest quantum machines are just about a little above about 1,000 or so qubits, and they're trying to push into that 2,000 qubit mark. That is still nothing because of those high error rates. In order to really get a useful quantum computer with the error rates that we're seeing today, you're going to need somewhere probably around 20 million qubits using quantum-based algorithms, right? Like Shor's algorithm, and there's a few others that you can use. If you were to get those error rates down and eliminate some of those error rates, come up with quantum readouts that you could capture much more accurately, then maybe a 20,000 qubit computer would work. And we'll talk about kind of why that mattered, as far as why Microsoft was going after the Majorana particle in their quantum machine, and how that factored into those error rates and getting a machine that could operate at far fewer qubits. Really, the whole thing, you'll see on the right side of the screen here. So the whole thing is driven by these, a combination of governments. China is a big factor in this, the United States, parts of the European Union, as well as private sectors. One of the leaders here is Atom Computer, along with IBM, Google. They're all getting in there. And there's a certain ego factor here too. Because even though we don't have a practical use for a quantum computer within the next several years at least, it's almost like a marquee thing for them, right? Dodge didn't need to build the Viper back in the 90s, but it really increased the cachet of their name. And so it is going to be with quantum. It's like whoever kind of gets to that first milestone and the next one, they're going to see their star rise. And so that's part of the reason.
Bill, what's the first milestone? What are we trying to get to?
Well, the first milestone was just building that quantum computer and having it execute a quantum operation. Now the milestones are, hey, can these quantum machines solve problems? Google was one. They just they posted something that their Willow quantum computer did recently, where it solved a problem that would take a classical computer several septillion years to solve. It was a useless mathematical problem, but it was still impressive, right? It was just, and so they're all trying to show this quantum superiority with these very particular problems right now. But none of it is useful outside of a few little edge cases, which we're going to talk about here really shortly.
So, Bill, when we're talking about actual use cases for these, there's nothing really tangible being pushed to market at this point, is there? Or is it just kind of an arms race, sort of along the lines of AI or something like that?
Yeah, so there is, in terms of quantum computer, no. There's nothing really tangible happening right now, with maybe one exception. And it's not a quantum computer, but it's quantum key distribution, which uses quantum mechanics to protect the exchange of security keys. So this is using the property of quantum mechanics that we just discussed, that as soon as you observe the quantum state, you're changing it. So you look at the photon, you change it. And so the way this works is that if you've got, and I think it's usually called Jane is trying to send her key to her public keys going to John down a fiber optic link. That is now a quantum key. And if anyone would observe that photon on its path, they would change that photon, and then Jane would immediately know that someone was snooping. So this makes interception of electronic information impossible. So this is one area where they are doing it today. Verizon has a system like this set up in the Washington, D.C. area. China has a system set up in their cities. And South Korea also has a system set up, and they're using that. So that's one good use case. But again, it's not a quantum computer per se.
But it's using the quantum theories and the quantum physics to create an extra level of security, and that's called quantum key distribution.
That's right. Yeah. The other thing that quantum computing is doing is it's driving the security people absolutely nuts, right? And so they're so petrified that this is just going to break RSA encryption, and the internet's going to come. The internet's going to be all clear text here shortly. That they're scrambling to get ahead of this, and so they're coming up with these really innovative encryption algorithms. NIST just approved a few based on Lattice framework. They've got their Kybers encryption algorithm that they've recently approved, along with a few others. They're also approving some new hashing algorithms that'll be quantum safe. And IBM has released for marketing a number of quantum safe encryption methods for their infrastructure. So you can buy quantum safe encryption today. And I think that's a really, really great bulwark against what's coming.
Bill, do you think we really know that it is in fact quantum safe if we don't know its full potential yet or where it's going to be?
It's a good point. So, I mean, I guess because it's all theoretical, we don't have a quantum computer powerful enough to actually test it. So I think your point is spot on. The math suggests that it will be quantum safe because the mathematics that they're using cannot quickly be solved by any type of polynomial equations, which really is where quantum excels.
Mm-hmm. I said, like I know what I'm talking about.
It's really humbling though, right? Because as he goes down this path, I think to myself that often or sometimes I'll find myself in a situation where I'm rambling about some sort of security crap that most people don't care about, MFA or DDoS or, one of these other acronyms that, we just kind of use daily. And, the layperson just kind of glazes over on that stuff. And that's honestly what's happening here with all this quantum business. We can't observe it. It's not good enough yet. The computers look cool, at least the picture that Bill's got there. If that's a quantum computer.
Yeah, they're beautiful. So, and just a quick refresher, this over here is, all these little cryogenic tubes are passing refrigerant as they go down and down towards the chip at the very bottom. And they're keeping that chip frozen, almost frozen, really, to near absolute zero, where you finally achieve superconductivity. And that chip exists. It's a coexistence of different types of superconductors under that extremely low temperature. The only other way to really do it would be to put it under very high pressure, and then over top of this chandelier, they have to put a shroud to keep all the noise out, because your cell phone going by, any type of magnetic interference, sound interference will destroy. It'll upset the qubits and the operations that are occurring within.
For our audio only listeners, we're looking at a chandelier style quantum computer here that's looks to be made out of precious metals, or it's very golden, and it's got probably about 6 or 7 layers to it with lots of wires coming down. It kind of looks like a cross between a chandelier and maybe like a tech jellyfish of some sort. But
it's like out of a sci-fi movie or something.
One of the things that I kind of relate it to, because I also have a hard time making that leap into the quantum thinking and the physics. But, we can look at a glass of water, the glass is half empty or half full. It's kind of our take or our opinion that we're bringing to a physical situation. But, this seems like this philosophically goes beyond materialism when we get into quantum, where there's just, nothing exists except for matter and movements. But it seems like there's an X factor here with the participant involved, or we're helping create a reality, or it's just going way beyond materialistic science at this point.
It's the religion of quantum is what I'm hearing.
I just want to know, how long in my lifetime am I going to have a quantum chip in my iPhone?
That's 2 years. Yeah, 2 years.
I'm sure. Yeah, no.
2 years.
Well, that's why it's like, because when you look at a quantum computer, and you just heard I gave you the size of 3 to 5 feet, the chip itself is about the size of a regular PC chip. All the stuff around it is the stuff that keeps it cold. So you don't get superconductivity, you don't get quantum unless you can keep it under very high pressure or very, very cold temperatures. As a result, everything that goes around quantum is very large, and it consumes a lot of electricity to keep it at that state.
Okay, so where's this all going?
I was just going to ask that.
Yeah, where are we at now today, Bill, after some of the recent advancements since our last podcast on this topic?
So so a couple things. First, I want to be sure that we understand where they're trying to get to. And one of the things I think they're doing, and I'll pick out a few things, is quantum AI is becoming a thing. They're also using artificial intelligence to augment quantum computing to drive the error rates down. So they're getting quantum calculations back. They're applying it to an AI algorithm, and they're helping that. They're trying to use that to eliminate some of the errors and drive up the error correction improvements. You're also seeing quantum getting into the financial space. The financial space is really interesting because the banks in particular are so interested in quantum. Why is that? Because quantum does such a good job of calculating huge amounts of data. And if the banks can use quantum and combine that with artificial intelligence, it can start to predict market fluctuations. And that could potentially rewrite the economy in ways that we really can't predict. So it's a space we should definitely watch closely there as this technology develops.
Do you think anybody's thinking about like the actual need for this for the general consumer? I get it for like, different areas. You brought up the banks. For you, our kids are using this in 50 years. What is there a benefit to them to actually have that in their iPhone? Are they getting something extra? Do we even want the mainstream to have this kind of power?
No. So no one's really thinking about that right now just because the quantum algorithms are so limited in their function. You don't program a quantum computer, of course, like you would program a PC. You don't program it to give you 10,000, frames per second in on your latest game. Its uses are just extremely focused on particular things. And so it'll never be a replacement for a classical computer. It won't. It just can't do everything a classical computer can do. It's just there's a few things that it does extraordinarily well.
That makes more sense when you say it that way, that it's not actually replacing what we have now.
I think I remember from the first time you were on, Bill, you need a classical computer to control the quantum computer.
That is absolutely correct. Yes. Yes, you do. The two go hand in hand. And then the data that comes out of the quantum computer is also analyzed by a classical computer.
Why is that, Bill? Is it just the nature, the actual physics of the quantum computers, or is there a reason that you could easily explain as to why that won't replace a classical computer?
Sure. When you think about quantum computing, think about it in terms of math. And so there might be a dozen or 24 useful algorithms that run on the quantum computer. And these algorithms, if something, they'll look, something like, parenthesis, R to the power of 5 minus W and, kind of all this stuff, right? And so that's how you're just putting data into that algorithm and you're getting something out of the other end, right? And so now you can imagine how incredibly focused this thing is. And you can't just like write a PowerShell script for it, right? It doesn't work that way at all. It's just solving very specific, mostly polynomial math problems.
Okay. So that's why it will be good for weather forecasting, drug development, financial modeling. You have a couple of other things here, traffic optimization and then artificial intelligence. Is that what's kind of putting the guardrails onto the quantum then and taking the place of classical computing to kind of optimize how it's functioning?
Yes. So artificial intelligence still has a little bit of a problem with dealing with huge volumes of data. This is where quantum really excels. A classical computer typically deals in exponential math. For a classical computer to go break a password that is 10 characters long, and let's say it's using 70 or so possible characters within that password, it can cycle through that password in about 2.8 quintillion operations. Okay, and so that's a long time. Now, quantum, with its polynomial math, what quantum does is it'll do that in the square root of that number. It's using quadratic equations to solve the problem. So instead of 2.8 quintillion, it's doing it in about 1.8 billion operations. That is why quantum's faster. It's not faster. It doesn't go through this data because it's moving bits around faster. It's going through the data because it needs to do far, far fewer calculations, approximately the square root of all the calculations that a classical computer has to do.
So it's not going to like turn my audio engineering processes down to like seconds instead of minutes. For example, when I produce a music track and I have to bounce out assets or a video, for example, it can take 10 minutes, so it's not going to be able to necessarily make those computer processes faster.
That's not on the horizon. No. In order for it to do that, you'd have to find some type of an algorithm that would do that.
Okay.
Yeah. And there, the classical computer is just going to be far more practical because even though it's going through a lot of data, it's really not going through that much data.
So I know that they've been working hard on this in the background. We don't hear much about quantum compared to AI, for example. There's been a lot of investments made, but what have you seen come to fruition in the tech space as far as quantum goes. I know there was some recent news, and I have a hard time pronouncing this. It's Majorana.
Yep.
Majorana
particle. Yep.
Okay, and named after a physicist, I assume. But is this Microsoft kind of getting a little over their skis here and trying to roll out a PR story for some extra press, or is this actually like something that's usable in the market, or will be in the near future?
Okay, so yeah, a lot's been said about this. Microsoft still has their press releases posted out there. A lot of information on the Majorana qubit. The way it's important to understand, the Majorana qubit employs a different state of matter than a traditional model does. So you got the 4 observable states of matter: solid, liquid, gas, and plasma. Then beyond that, you have other states of matter. And then the Majorana particle uses what's called a topological state of matter. And in physics, the topology refers to the ability to alter a structure, bend it, twist it. You just can't tear it apart, but you bend it and you twist it, and it will maintain its molecular principles, its molecular properties. Now, the reason that's so important is because that makes this Majorana particle very resilient to noise, and that reduces your error rates. So if they can do that, and it's a very difficult thing to do because now they're working with a different state of matter, and they're working with this new particle, and they're trying to line everything up. And so what they've done is they've taken, at their superconducting level layer, they've taken aluminum, and that's their superconductor, and that's sandwiched in with some doped semiconductors to funnel the photons through them. Microsoft claims that they have been able to execute some quantum operations with that, and so they've claimed that they've kind of gotten into the first gate of the Majorana particle. They're not claiming they've done all of it, but they're saying they've gotten through the first part of it. Now that has come under a lot of scrutiny, and we're not so sure that they have. So scientists who are looking at this and looking at the papers have noted that the tests that Microsoft has performed are inconsistent with what they would expect to see from the Majorana particle. So there's a lot of doubt there. And this isn't the first time Microsoft's been challenged on something, and they've had to withdraw 1 or 2 papers in the last several years, from what I understand.
So Nick, this seems to me like there's kind of these new things coming up, right? Remember when we were growing up, there was the 5 senses, right? You had touch, taste, sight, vision, and smell, right? Then somewhere along the line, they came up with umami, and they invented like this 6th one, which was umami, which apparently you can only get in certain foods. Not sure. I still don't know what it is. But now what I'm hearing from Bill is that they've invented several new states, right? Beyond the plasma, the liquid, the gas, the solid. So that, I mean, that's interesting in and of itself, is like you could just invent stuff and call it what you want.
Well, to be clear, I mean, it's a Microsoft's teensy defense. Microsoft isn't claiming that they invented a topological model. That already existed in physics. They're claiming that they are exploiting a topological model to enable quantum operations across the Majorana particle. And that's what scientists are saying. No, we're not quite so sure that's really what's happening here.
Can you explain to me what umami is?
I'm a little bit of a home chef.
Well, okay, let's hear it.
So it's not a sense, it's more of a flavor, right? So there's savory, meaty, richness, salty, sweet. I don't remember all the things that your tongue can sense, but umami is supposed to be that mouth-filling kind of sense, savory, that you can't quite put your finger on. It probably be better described by, like, when it's missing. Like if you had a soup that was really thin and not very satisfying, it'd be missing that umami, that richness.
It's like the quantum, right? Like it's either on or it's off. It's either there or it's missing. So it's kind of the quantum version of taste.
I like that. I think you're on this.
That's a great way to put it.
That'd be a cool name for a quantum computer, umami.
You heard it here first, folks.
Nick, we just came up with a name for one of your cats.
Yep.
Done. Stop the recording.
Oh,
Well,
yes.
if there was a...
Our work here is done.
We didn't even need a quantum computer for that.
That sixth hairless cat.
Umami.
Are we back to Schrodinger's cats again? Is that how we came
Umami.
here?
Umami.
Umami. That's right.
So I got one more thing that actually goes into philosophy a little bit here. So, I want to call out the something that Google uncovered, and then something that NASA uncovered. So Google was doing some quantum operations. This wasn't that long ago. I think it might have been last year. And there's a blog on their post about it that said they got some unexpected results that they believe lend credence to the theory of parallel universes. And they put this right out there on their blog, and they they wrote a bit about it, which I found really surprising. But what was even stranger was that there is this story circulating, and the story itself, the first part of the story is true. NASA shut down its quantum computer in February of 2024 because they got some unexpected results that they said challenge contemporary thinking, and they shut it down. And with no further comment, they began looking into it.
Well, hold on a minute. Is that like the Catholic Church shutting down science in the 1400s because the sun is no longer the center of the universe?
Well, not necessarily. So it might be that, but you're doing what people are doing, right? People were wondering, well, what's happening here? So imaginations have really run rampant. And the stories right now range from something, like, well, they just found, some new math that they're trying to resolve, to they've stumbled into some alternate reality, or they have stumbled across some type of extraterrestrial intelligence.
Yes, like the movie Contact. Remember that?
Tony Foster.
Great flick.
Yes.
I had it sitting back here for like 6 months, and I finally threw it out.
Get it out, because I'm bringing it there. Here we go. Have you heard of the Mandela effect?
Want to say yes, but go ahead. Hit us with it, Josh.
This is going on. This is going on like wildfire over the last probably 5+ years on the internet. Have you heard of it, Bill?
I've not. No.
Maybe it was the Biggs. What's the particle accelerator in Switzerland called? Is it the Biggs?
The Large Hadron Collider?
Yeah. The theory goes that CERN started messing with that. We slipped into a different timeline. So there's people that remember things inaccurately. And Nelson Mandela dying is one of those, where some people remember him passing away, and then some people remember him being released from prison. Another example would be the Bernstein Bears, the way it's spelt, the Berenstain Bears or the Bernstein Bears. It goes into pop culture, verbal cues. Like mirror, mirror on the wall from Snow White. It's actually magic mirror on the wall. So they're saying that we slipped into a different timeline at some point.
I'm going to use this in my next argument at home with my wife, right? Where it's like I'm like, yo, you're in a different dimension here.
That's the best use.
So maybe that's, lending some credence to this.
Yo, you're in a different timeline.
So it's funny you should say that, Nick, because that's exactly kind of where some of these arguments are going. They're drifting off into quantum memories, and the theory that you actually never really die, because at every juncture in your life, you, like Schrodinger's cat, you either live or you die. And so a version of yourself will live in perpetuity as it always junctures off. And so you'll die an infinite number of times, but there's always another one of you out there in some type of an alternate universe. So it's really diving deep, and I don't believe any of it, but it's just interesting thought material.
You really took us there, Josh.
Yeah, well, hey, that's my job.
I should not have thrown away that hat.
Why did they shut it down if they found something interesting?
they didn't understand the results. So the results that they got from their quantum machine did not correlate with their understanding of physics.
Or they just didn't like what they got back.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I have a question, Bill, for you. And maybe it's more for Josh.
Bring it on.
Why are the aliens always probing us?
Well, yeah, that's a great question. I wasn't prepared to answer that one.
Well, as a UFO enthusiast or whatever you're
UAP.
calling them, I guess you can't call it a UFO anymore.
Yeah.
I don't know, whatever it's called. But
yeah, that's a great question. I always joke about, if they're so intelligent, why are they always crashing and leaving stuff behind? I don't know. I think, one explanation could be is that there's so many different variations of them, or there might be less intelligent ones, less advanced ones that are actually curious about our biology. There's also some wild theories out there that they can't reproduce. They can no longer reproduce, or they become asexual to the point where they need to extract some sort of biological material from us or some DNA to perpetuate themselves. I mean, you can go as sci-fi on that as you want. But for every crazy question, there's a million quick, crazy answers. What else do you got for us, Bill, in terms of I know that they were afraid of their results, perhaps. Maybe they were shocked by them, that they thought that they could be altering the fabric of space-time. Was that a valid concern? That seemed to be what their focus was. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. So there was some concern that one of the speculations is that they were poking at the Higgs field. You might have heard of the Higgs boson particle, which is the particle that makes up really the fabric of the universe. It's one of the fundamental ones, and they were poking at that field. And when you do that in a manner that you don't really understand the physics surrounding it, then you begin to wonder: is there a butterfly effect? Right? Are you affecting something elsewhere in the world, or are you changing the trajectory of some other timeline? Absolutely crazy stuff. And I guess if you're dealing with quantum that we don't really fully understand, sure, they're all valid questions. But that was indeed one of the concerns. And
so
yeah,
it's kind of like play stupid games, win stupid prizes.
Yeah,
we didn't know what was going on.
Yes, that's right. And that kind of stuff happens inside of a quantum computer. It's like you're not just passing electrons back and forth. Like you are doing some really cutting edge things, and you're poking at these subatomic particles.
Is NASA going to turn that thing back on?
Yeah.
What's so weird about NASA is that they're not talking about it. And it would be so simple if they would just issue some statements, but we haven't heard.
That brings up a question I had about just security ramifications, national security. I know DARPA's been involved with quantum. I think Microsoft was one of two companies that was chosen to work with DARPA on this. On a local scale and a worldwide scale, can you think of any attack vectors this might create?
The limits there's no limit.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's probably no limit because we don't know enough. I think the potential attack vectors could vary from the technical as we understand it to the absolutely outlandish. When we were talking about it earlier, quantum memories and such. It could just really go off the rails.
Gentlemen, I'm still working with users trying to keep them to not store passwords in spreadsheets. Use MFA, lock your credit, right? Like we're at the basic level here. So quantum, quantum in theory of they may crack the SSL decrypt. Good. So what, right? Let's focus on getting our credits locked, passwords into a password manager, and MFA.
I think, it's a good question, Josh, but the thing that I can't stop thinking about is the weapons that you might build, what kind of weapons is this thing going to create? We split the atom, we got the atom bomb. What is this thing going to come up with? We're talking about getting to different timelines with our wives at home. What kind of bombs are we going to start dropping on people because of this?
You poke that Higgs boson, it's going to poke back.
We might not even have any computers to hack anymore after this thing gets done. Shut it down.
Yeah.
Shut it down. Yeah.
Yeah.
It seems like Chernobyl.
I don't know if you are Rick and Morty fan, you guys, but a lot of this has been explored in cartoon format on that show already.
The Simpsons probably has an episode about quantum computing, and it's probably spot on.
Everything from Schrodinger's cat to the Mandela effect to Higgs boson.
To the ambient effect, too.
I think we should probably just call it for today.
I love this. Thank you, Bill. This has been really fun. What a wild convo today. I love it.
I think this is what happens when you don't really know what you're talking about, right? You're just like trying to take it in, and you just never know where we're going to go.
That's how I feel. Yes.
At least you know what's going on, Bill.
We'll leave it there. Thanks so much, Bill, for joining us today. You've been listening to Bill Harris talk about quantum. We also have Eric Brown and Nick Mellon as usual. My name is Joshua Schmidt, co-host and producer. You've been listening to The Audit presented by IT Audit Labs. Please like, share, and subscribe. Tell a friend. We have video up on Spotify now, and we're publishing every other week on YouTube with shorts in between. See you soon.
You have been listening to The Audit, presented by IT Audit Labs. We are experts at assessing risk and compliance while providing administrative and technical controls to improve our clients' data security. Our threat assessments find the soft spots before the bad guys do, identifying likelihood and impact, while our security control assessments rank the level of maturity relative to the size of your organization. Thanks to our devoted listeners and followers, as well as our producer, Joshua J. Schmidt, and our audio-video editor, Cameron Hill. You can stay up to date on the latest cybersecurity topics by giving us a like and a follow on our socials and subscribing to this podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you source your security content.